Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Behind Massive Screens, a game development podcast here from Massive Entertainment in Malmö, Sweden. So for the people who this is your first episode, what we try to do here at Behind Massive Screens is, I think Dóri put it, that we rope in our colleagues to come and sit in this cozy podcast studio to find out as much as we can about their job, the industry, and how game development works in general.
Indeed, and today is no different. And today we're going to be focusing on world design and, touching a little bit upon Avatar Frontiers of Pandora in the process. We have Kunal and Mikhail here. Welcome. But let me just ask you first to introduce yourself a little bit and tell us your job titles.
Yeah, I'm an associate art director here at Massive, working currently on Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, and working mainly with visual design and coming up with a world together with an amazing team here at Massive.
Yeah, I'm Kunal Luthra, and I'm a lead technical artist and also working on Avatar Frontiers of Pandora. My job is to look at performance and shaders and make sure that the disciplines and teams work seamlessly together, supporting with tools and various effects.
Yeah, that's usually one of the questions we ask as well. Like, speaking to you, Mikhail, for example, you're associate art director now, but you work very much as a lead concept artist for Avatar as well. So I think we're going to jump back a little bit to the lead concept artist thing, because just pitch the job, essentially. What is a lead concept artist? On a kind of higher level. We'll dig into this later on.
Yes, so I'll talk mainly about the general concept artist job, like not specifically the lead part, because I think this is what is more interesting for the people, not like the managing and the JIRAs and whatnot. So the job of the role of the concept artist is to come up with visual design. I personally don't like the title concept artist because it kind of brings a little bit of a misconception. What I prefer is, like in animation industry, what our title is visual development artist. So like our job is to actually develop the visual language of the game, develop the style, help come up with visual ideas, and support the narrative and the game design. So what we do is, like, we get a brief from narrative or from game designers, and then we need to take this brief and convert it to the visuals so the team can actually visualize what we're doing. Because if I tell you, for example, now, like, imagine a spaceship with like 4 thruster engines which goes through space, everybody has a different picture, but that's when we come in, where we can align the whole team. Okay, this is what we're doing, right? Visually, kind of like creating a blueprint for the visual design language.
Right. Yeah. And technical artist. We've had a couple of technical artists on, and it's always interesting to get the tech part in there as well.
Yeah,
like
so
what that actually means.
For us, it's important that we do get like a nice brief from the visual design perspective, so that we can try to achieve as close as possible to the concept and the visual design. And that we usually support with, we talk a lot to tech, like in Snowdrop, and we figure out if this is necessary, if there's a necessary tech that we need to in order to achieve this result. And then we also assess those things ourselves together with them, and level design, multiple disciplines that can help us reach that goal of that concept. And that's multiple layers. And for us, specifically tech art, we always look at performance, and we look at like visual quality, and those two things go hand in hand, right? And we always try to come up with like smart solutions and how we can keep things efficient and also look great at the same time, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. But there's always a balance in that sense.
We'll get back to that double-edged sword later on. You don't have to worry.
Yeah, but another thing that we also would like to know off the top is, kind of your journey. How did you get into the games industry, and how did you end up being here at Massive in your current roles?
Do you want a long story or a short story? No.
I mean,
the medium story?
The medium
the medium.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a lot of time. It's a podcast, but yeah.
I've been playing games since I can't remember. I was born in Georgia, right? So back in the day, it was like basically Soviet Union. So we didn't have Nintendos and your PlayStations. Yeah. So I got like in Soviet Union, we had this Dandy, which was like a repo, like a Soviet ripoff of NES. Right? We had all the games. We had like Mario's and DuckTales and whatnot, but they were like the ripoff. So I started with this when I was like 4 years old, and like I've been playing the games through my whole life. I started doing 3D when I was in high school. And then slowly after that, I was like, okay, I want to actually work in games. So yeah, I studied animation a little bit. And then I think when I was 21, 22, I started working in some smaller indie studios. Then I joined THQ Nordic. We're doing games for them like Aquanox and Wreckfest. I joined as an art director there. And then I switched actually to film industry at some point for 3 years because I just wanted to try it out. So worked for 3 years for films like Hellboy, Rambo, and there's an upcoming movie called The Electric State. It's directed by the Russo brothers. It's based on the Swedish, very popular Swedish artist Simon Stålenhag.
Mm-hmm.
So he's creating this world, so they're making a movie about it. So I work on this one. But then at some point, I actually realized that I miss games because what we'll be talking about the podcast is communication between departments and something that this is missing a little bit in the movie industry, right? At least as a concept artist. So I came back to the games and coming to Massive, and I've been here for 3.5 years already. Yeah, I love it.
So for the 3D in high school, that part of your education is something you did in your spare time? Like how did that start?
My teacher actually in my IT class, he was a big fan of 3D. So he was like, oh, I installed this software called 3ds Max. I was like, oh, wow, this looks so cool. I can make 3D models. So I just spend my evenings and my weekends. I was very nerdy. My friends were like, oh, let's go out to party or something. I was like, no, I need to model this. I found this tutorial online. I want to do this.
Right.
So and then basically that's how it went.
Yeah. So what's the big difference? Sorry, Kunal. I'm just popping questions into my head with the movie industry versus the games industry. You talked about the communication lacking kind of not being the same in the movie industry. But what was that like going from games to movies? Like that jump and then back to games again?
It was an interesting experience because in games, when we're designing the worlds or when we're designing for games, we need to think of the player experience, right? We're designing in 360, right? This prop that we're designing needs to look good from all the sides, especially when we're talking about 3D, AAA games.
Sure.
But then in movies, it was all about the shot, right? And all about a lot about the narrative and supporting the narrative and the story. But also it's like a 2D shot, right? The end product is the 2D image on the screen, and we can, it's all about the composition and the lighting and the mood, and also very quick readability. Because in movies you have 3 seconds of this prop on the screen, and the audience needs to understand what this prop is doing without the script telling them, oh, this is a cup, right?
Sure.
You need to look at it and it's like, okay, this is a cup. So it's all about finding those very quick reads, while in games it's also very important, but it's a little bit a different mindset. And the thing that I didn't like about the movie industry, why I decided to come back to games, is as a concept artist, you're a little bit more separated there. You get a brief from your art director or production designer, you do something, and then you do the concept, and then you send it, and then you don't know what happens to it before you see the screen, the movie in the cinema, right?
Right.
You don't even know if it was approved or it was how it was made, how it got changed in post-production, or during filming and whatnot. Whilst in games, you're in constant communication with all the other departments. So I'm doing a concept, I can talk to a level artist, and then we check, and then we constantly iterate and work together, right? This is the part that I like about our job.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Shameless self-plug, which we do from time to time. If you want to find out more about this that Mikhail is talking about here, we have an old episode on lighting in games, which is kind of similar. We had a similar discussion about movies, light, and now we got some more information. That's super interesting. Thank you very much. Kunal?
Yeah, thank you for that. It was really awesome to hear. So my story is, also very similar in the start. Played video games as a kid, avoided parties, would rather stay in front of my computer. Played a lot of Half-Life. Also had a bootleg console when I was in India, because they had all the kind of bootleg stuff there, and they had a DVD storage you could buy that burned discs and everything, and it was that was really exciting. And then you pop the disc in, and it's just a completely different game. It's like, damn it! Wow. It was still fun though. A lot of exploring in that sense. I'm very interested in hardware and just games, and then messing around with softwares after I figured out how to start modding games, and I was into modding.
What games were you modding?
So I don't know if a lot of people know this game, but it's called Liero. It's this Worms kind of game, and it's pixelated as hell, and it's amazing. It's got a lot of destruction on it, so that will kind of come back to that at some point.
Yeah. So it all started there.
Yeah. So I was always a little bit of a pyromaniac as a kid. So that I transferred that energy into modding and game development in a healthier manner, which was interesting. But it worked. But yeah, so I started playing a lot of games, modding. That got me into the mindset of development, and I got into more 3D software tools. like I was using a lot of Maya, not so much a little bit 3ds Max, but I preferred Maya for some reason. But now it's all about Blender these days. So Blender is awesome. So 3D software is from that, and then I went to school. I started drawing a lot as well. I was into every part of development, like concept art, 3D art, animation, rigging, just trying to do everything, building shaders, because I just wanted to know what all the building pieces were to make a final product of a video game. And then when I got to the coding part, which I wasn't the best at, so I had a lot of trouble with that, but I was willing to learn and sort of understand the process of how to, like make a character walk, for instance. Like, okay, I made a concept of a character. I made a 3D model. I rigged it. I made some shaders for the characters, materials, and whatever they wear, and then starting to actually make a third person controller to move the character around using some C# code in Unity. I think I used back then, a Unity engine, and you learn a lot from just doing that. But I was just happy that I had the I would call it the consistency to actually go through all of that stuff, even though all the hurdles and I still tried and I kept trying. I failed a lot, and that's fine, because that's how you get better and learn a lot. But that's the way I got into the mindset of this is what I want to be. This is what I need to be. This is what I got to do. So then I applied for schools, and then I went to Blekinge Tekniska Högskola. It's here in Sweden, a little bit north from Skåne, and 3 years bachelor's, and then I went back, didn't find a job, was a telephone salesman for a bit. That sucked. But,
I think
but it gave me
many of us been in that exact spot.
It's like, well, here we are. And, but it gave me enough money.
Times.
It gave me enough money, and then actually the school called back and they wanted me to be a technical animator teacher for like 2 weeks. I'm like, all right, cool. Then I kept going. I went back, and I gave me some more merit, and then actually went to TGA, another game school for tech artists. Yeah, the game assembly here in Malmö. And that sort of gave me the opportunity to take my. Unknowingly, I was a tech artist. I didn't know. I wanted to be a 3D artist, and that's it. I think that was my comfort zone. And then my teacher like kind of pushed me into the tech art direction. TJ, he's like, yeah, but you should try that because you made a bunch of shaders and stuff. I'm like, I don't know. I'm not so sure. I'm very insecure. And then I applied for art and tech art because he told me. And then obviously he put me on tech art. So I went to tech art. And I was really close to like quit because it was getting very difficult when it came to scripting and Maya and Python. I'm like, this is not what I wanted to do. But I stayed. I was consistent. I tried. I kept pushing myself, and here I am, almost 9 years later. Now I'm a lead tech artist at Massive, and I love it. And I love being a tech artist. And I can totally see. I use everything, all of my knowledge, to help make this work. And yeah, I'm really thankful for my teacher too. Shout out to Costas. Yeah. Thank you for pushing me.
So both of you knew that you wanted to work in video games, because we have that sometimes people really want to work in video games. They know that from the beginning. They go all weird kind of roundabouts ways sometimes. And there's people who's like, I didn't even know it was a job.
Yeah.
But it seems like the two of you knew, like, this is what I want to make.
Yeah, it was not easy. Like knowing that this is like, because we know the entry level is really high.
Yeah.
Like in game development, it's like, okay, you got to do something unique, or you have to be something that nobody else has seen, and like try to do. Man, that's a lot of work.
Also, I guess when we're starting, it was like, how do I, like, there's no information. It's like, if we had this podcast, like, I don't know, 12 years ago when I was starting, it would be so good, I was like, okay, how do I get
subscribe?
How do I get
for
game
sure.
development? Are there even studios in the city? Like,
I mean, the
where
schools,
do
there weren't even schools. Like the schools were just the new ones that just starting to show when I was trying to apply. And my parents were like, you should be a lawyer or a doctor.
Of course.
And I think also, like, the last podcast we did with a technical artist, Connie, he echoed kind of the same sentiment of, I didn't know I was a technical artist. I was just doing 3D, and then my teacher told me.
Yeah.
And like,
they saw the potential of it, right? Yeah. And we were just blind, just like, we were just interested in video games. We just want to mess around with everything, fidget with everything. I guess that's what more of a better word for it. We just like to fidget with tech and just fidget.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, oh, everything is interesting.
Wasn't it Connie who said that one of the first questions in class was, "What is tech art?"
Yeah. Yeah, after he was enrolled in the class, then the students raised their hand and asked, "So what is it that we just applied to become?"
That's a good question.
It is a good question.
Kunal is questioning his entire life. What am I doing?
Dramatic zoom, like. But yeah, it's ever evolving. It's always been, tech art has always been like this constantly evolving sort of field, that because we have tech art generalists, we have tech art that only works with scripts and like tools, like Python tech artists. But at the end of the day, everything is in common is that we just need to make sure that we are there for the other disciplines and other teams to help them achieve the goals that the project is set out for. So it's about getting that across.
Yeah, because it after from the description, it feels very much like a role of merging, of like there's several elements that have been created by others that needs to come together and become the thing that was envisioned from the concept originally.
Yeah,
and that's where the tech artist steps in, and
because it's also our job to sort of understand the engine to a level where we can confidently say, no, this is not how we do things, and this is how we do things, or this is what we need to do in order to achieve this. Because engine teams, they don't have time to, go and listen to every person's needs and wants. They need to be filtered somehow as well, because some things are maybe not, efficient, or might be great ideas, but they might not work in the timeline for a project, for instance. And then tech art needs to step in and be like, all right, let's assess this. And we talk amongst each others, and then we figure out the best course of action. Should we bring it up to tech or not? Is it worth it? Can we say no already? So it's a lot of filtering in a sense.
Yeah, I guess, like, oh yeah, that's a great feature, but it's used for like a fraction of a percent of the game. Is it worth spending the time and effort?
It depends on, sorry.
But also, like, I want to mention, because like Kunal is kind of making it look a little bit like they're like always like, oh no, we can't do this. No, this is not them. Like, working with the like tech art team here is amazing. I think it's like we have one of the strongest tech art teams in the industry. It's like we give them the concepts, and they're like, okay, yes, like always coming up with solutions, right? How we can actually do it, rather than just like trying to put it like, no, we can't do this, we can't do this.
I appreciate it. It's like
amazing.
The most important thing, I think that's more of a personal level, is like you got to stay curious, because if you're locked on a certain pattern, or if you're locked on a certain way of working, then you're also blocking possibilities. So if you keep staying curious and you see a concept, if I see a concept, I'm like, all right, what's my inner child saying to me? It's like, what is fun here in this picture? What can I make? How can I make that work in a video game that other people can feel what this concept is feeling? How can I help you achieve that? Yeah. I think you got to stay in tune with that in order to sort of fully become that, tech artist or game developer.
I think that's very important, right? We're first game developers, right? And then we're like concept artists and tech artists and character artists and game designer, right? But first we're all like bunch of game developers placed together. We are making a game,
exactly.
Right?
Yeah. At the end of the day, we just gonna make one product. It's gonna blow people's minds.
Because as time moves on, and talking about the engine now, like as time moves on, it has to affect, well, obviously tech art, but also concept art in the way that technology constantly moves. When you're working on these concepts and working out like what the game is going to be, realize that, okay, we have new potential, we have more potential, we can do this now, we could explore this now in a way we couldn't like a couple of months ago, or even a couple of weeks ago. So that must be like a constant learning curve as well. Like,
definitely.
It's challenging.
Yeah, I think the more the tech evolves, the more we also need to open up our minds. Like, okay, we couldn't do this in like PS3 times, but now we can, right? And what can we do, and how we can do this, and how we change our pipelines, and how do we change our approach? Because it just gets also like much more complicated to do all those stuff. Right?
Yeah. It's always a risk to invest, right? Like, there's always a risk to like, okay, do we know from 3 years from now that this will be an absolute necessity to have in the engine, or a feature, or in the game? Then we need to be able to think ahead and think like, okay, what can we do? So that's why it's important to be curious and start to think about all the possibilities, all the challenges. And in a sense, you will kind of gauge, like you get experience from that, and you can start to gauge like where this will head. And you can also see it from other games shipping around, other studios shipping games and seeing like what they're doing, and that also inspires you to look in a different direction. Or I think it's just keeping an eye open and mind open. I think that's
if they could do this, we can do this, and build it in a even further.
Yeah. But does it only get more complicated? Does it get easier as well? Like that balance.
Definitely. Some processes become easier, some processes become harder. So it's always a balance.
Yeah, it's always a balance. I think the easiest answer for me as a tech artist is like the hardware. It's like the hardware is so much stronger now. It's like for us, it's easier to push more triangles in the screen, have more complex shaders, higher quality characters, like everything. We can just crank it up to another level now because the GPUs and the CPUs, and we have more memory. Like we have so much more space to work within, and that helps achieving the concepts, and visual design much closer to it, which is really awesome. So in a way, I'm like, yes, it is more expensive to own that hardware, but it is also, an opportunity for us to evolve our tech. So Snowdrop also can evolve with the new hardware that comes out, which is really fun.
Yeah. Now, one thing that I want to talk about, if we get a little bit more into kind of your day-to-day, because we have two disciplines here that, thinking about them without diving too deep into them, I feel like I've always felt like they were kind of on the separate end of the production pipeline, from concept to tech art. But it is, and I have learned this, it's way more linked and intricate and complicated than that. But can we talk a little bit, maybe choose an example from your work lately, and kind of go through how it evolves from once you get the brief from the creative director and moving onwards?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as you say, it starts from a brief, right? First, we need to understand what we want to do for the game. Like, and as an example, we can say like, oh, we want to make this cool new landmark in this game that we're making, like in Avatar, let's say. And then we get a brief, and the first thing, like a lot of people think like, oh, concept artists will go and start drawing stuff. No, first thing that what we do is we do research, right? Because this is very important, especially for the worlds we build here at Massive, like that the attention to details that we pay here. We're making very realistic worlds, right? So what we first need to do, and this is job of the concept artist, is actually research and do visual design before, like the drawing or like the creating painting or creating pretty pictures is not the job, right? It's like the output of our job, right? It's like what we can present to other teams, but our main job is like to do the research on how can we make this landmark believable, how we can make it interesting, how we can make it also to the brief and what we can do. And also this is where Kunal's team comes, like how can we technically achieve this, because we can design a crazy landmark, but then if we can actually achieve this in the engine, then we did our job very badly, right? So first thing is research. We use Pinterest a lot, we use Wikipedia, we use different books. A lot of times when we start a new project, the concept team often goes to field trips to like take references and to get inspired, because it's one thing to, let's say, look at Hagia Sophia from the pictures, but then when you go there, you see like how grand it is.
You
like
feel it.
You feel it, right? It's very, very different, right?
Yeah, so, and that's what you want the player to do,
exactly,
to be there and feel it.
So exactly,
that's interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
So this is very important. Like research is like crucial step. If you've done your research bad, then it doesn't matter what you do later. Like the end product won't really feel believable. So this is very important. And then we start with sketches, right? So we start drafting first ideas, and very rough, because it's very important. We can spend like 2 weeks creating this beautiful illustration, right? But if we just like sit in our corner and draw, it also is a bad thing for the project, because like we do sketches and then we show them to the tech art team, we show them to the creative direction, we show them to the level artists, we show them to production as well, because like, hey, do we have time to actually build this, right? Because we're in the end making a product, we have deadlines, so we need to be mindful about this. We show this to the audio teams. It's like, hey guys, we're planning this landmark. Like, how do you think we can make it sound? And then to the lighting, hey, can we make it the light here like this or like that? So it's always constant iteration, and because it's also much cheaper to iterate on a concept stage, right? Because we don't commit to anything, we're just exploring ideas, and it's very, very easy to make changes and iterations. It's much harder later when we build half of the landmark to be like, oh, well, actually lighting doesn't work with this one. Let's change it, right? Yeah. So this is where we come in basically, and what we do on day to day. So brief, then we do research, then we do sketches. Once we agree on the sketches, we're still like, okay, this is the direction that we like. We validate it with most of the teams, Then we go into the detail pass and we create a beautiful image, which we can show to the team as well as an inspiration. Okay, this is what we're doing, but also to figure out all the simple details, like the textures, and then the type of grass that is scattered here, like the type of small propping that we have here, how we set dress it, how we put the small lights here, right? But the key, the major part of our job, like the 80%, comes in those first two, sketching and research.
Yeah. And then once the concept is approved and moves further down the line, when is it that tech art starts getting their hands on it?
Yeah. So this whole process that you described, like we try to find like smart ways to sort of categorize them. So because it can sound chaotic, but it's really not. It's more like we try to develop stages for that, like stage gates, almost like L stages we call them, like landmark level stages, equality stages. So we have like L0, L1, L2, L3. So L0 is like where we start just doing blockouts, and that starts, it goes through concept first. Like, okay, what's the major silhouettes? It can be built by boxes, gray boxes, very like low resolution meshes to give it a feeling and a language, like capture the essence of the concept a bit, like broad strokes. And then we can already start with the lighting pass, like where would the general mood be, and like what will it feel like in the certain time of day, if there's specific templates we need to think about. And then we move on to the next stage, which is we look at the size and distances, like how we look in performance and streaming. Like, is this a safe distance for us can we fly into this area? Because that's a different streaming regulations we have when you're flying, because you have to streaming content much faster. So it depends on the content that you're placing there. So we have to think about these steps, but we implement these steps in the stages that we give. And then each stage we have gates for different periods of time during the production of this landmark, for instance. And with that, we also have polish phases inside, right? So when we reach to like L2, we start adding a lot more props, like try to give it more of that nice feeling that's closer to the concept. And L3 is like more polish, get closer to it. And then we do like a performance pass. We check the content. If it's over budget, and we analyze the area. We check if it's using, how much textures are you using, mesh try count, all of that stuff.
Yeah, this is memory budget, not
memory
money,
budgets.
not money budget.
The memory budget, exactly. Like how much will my graphics card melt if I walk into this one? No, good. Then we did a good job. So it's like we just try to make sure that we incorporate that in all the stages, and that everybody's aware of when these stages are getting close. So that, okay, every discipline has a responsibility. So okay, I'm closing into the stage gate 3. All right, I need to be able to fulfill these criteria before we move on to the next one. Otherwise, it will block everybody else. Yeah. So we sort of like rely on each other to do that part, which is good because it gives people more responsibility and a feeling of like autonomy. Like, I got to do this and this is my thing, and that's great. I think that gives people the power to sort of bring the best out of it.
Sure.
Yeah, but you ask the question like when tech art kind of gets involved, but like we all get involved in the most early stage, right? The research and the brief, because like what I mentioned before, that the games become more complex to do is because the realization level that is currently required from the AAA games, especially the ones that we do here at Massive, is so high that every small piece of change that do affect so many teams, that we all need to be very, very aligned from the very beginning. Like, so like even
there's so many systems that we need to think about. For our tech art's perspective, like that's one thing, the stages that we think about. When it's always performance and it's always visual quality. There's always those two main things for us that is the most important part. So research wise, like personally, like I was out in like thunderstorms and like recording raindrops like sliding on surfaces and on objects in the world, because I was like, how does this work? Can we make this work in with our tech? And yes we can.
As it turns out.
As it turns out, we can. And that's all because of researching, trying to understand like how the physical properties of a raindrop and type of material behaves. And just by, researching that, taking photos and like that, like you said, if you're in that area, you can feel it, you can understand it better, you can smell it, you can give a sense of it. So that's really important for us too, to do the research part when it comes to materials and stuff like that. And when it comes to the stages, delivering a concept, like you also mentioned before, like we should be able to walk around the entire landmark from all the different directions, needs to look good from all angles. And if the landmark requires a specific shader for like the rock, if like maybe it's a crystal on the rock or something, I don't know, anything like that is bespoke for the landmark, we look into that stuff too, and like try to make sure that it's performant and it just holds up as much as possible.
Yeah, so you're not just thinking about that it looks good from all angles, but that the performance is good the entire way.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we have various tools to capture like a frame, and then we dissect the frame and see what every pixel and how much every pixel costs and what is it rendering, and we can see exactly what's happening in every pixel on the screen with these tools, and we can profile CPU performance and together help with Snowdrop. Team of Snowdrop, shout out. So they like we work really close with them to sort of see, engage like how Snowdrop breathes with the content that we are creating, and then we can keep it like in a consistent, sort of breath. So that I think that's a good way to say it. Like we try to make sure that it's not like hyperventilating. So like it's always like a so we can like feed this content like the stream when you're streaming things in, when you're flying past it. And then we stream things out at the same time, so we kind of keep everything nice and flowy.
Yeah, I was thinking about that before because you used the word streaming. Just in case somebody doesn't know what it means, can you just define that in a couple of sentences? What is streaming in the case of
streaming
rendering?
is forgive me if I'm wrong, Snowdrop, but but it's our way of like keeping things in memory. So that when you're in a location and you streaming in the content, basically loading in all the data, like the meshes and the textures, and you can run around that area and you won't notice any like popping or anything because everything or lots will change, but textures and meshes will remain basically the same, and they will be seamless when you walk around. Like they won't like disappear unless you're outside the streaming distance, and then they would start. Every object has its own streaming bucket, like it stays in a different bucket or distance, and then after a while, we just remove it from memory, or we just kill it from memory, so that we can make room for other things, basically.
Sure. Because our worlds that we build are big,
quite
right?
huge,
We can't load all of this in one. And even we have such a great hardware nowadays, we still can't do it, right? So
if you
need to
flip the camera around quickly, it needs to be there, even though you can't keep it there the entire time, because then what's in front of the camera might suffer in performance.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, I want to talk a little bit about, because, of course, in Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, we have biomes that are bespoke, created by a massive in the game team, and haven't appeared in the films before. So, well, first of all, how do you start approaching that when you get that brief of like, oh yeah, make a new biome that is in the Avatar, and it has to be, fit the lore and be like real scientifically.
Yeah, I think like what is cool about this universe, what I like, is like the way Disney and Luthra are approaching this the Pandora, the world, right? Because it's a reflection of Earth, right? And what Dylan Cole, which is a production designer on Lies on Side, responsible for everything Navi and natural, says that Pandora is not science fiction, right? Avatar is not science fiction; it's science facts. So what we do, as I mentioned before, is the first step is research, like to seeing what we have on Earth, to see what type of biomes we have, how do they work, how do they interact with each other, what type of plants do grow there, what type of fauna we have there, how do they occur in the real world, because all the biomes have different weather conditions and how they occurred on Earth, and then we take this information, we like put it all in our brains and like try to dissect. It's like, okay, how do we make this Pandora now? So this is, I think, the first step, and this is how we did it for our game. We did a lot of research trips, and also like gathered a lot of reference and read through a lot of articles, watched all the documentaries about planet Earth, and that's
cool. I love that.
That's fun part of our job as well. Learning stuff, and then we start sketching, right? We start ideating. We're like, oh, can we do this? Like, for example, one of the biomes, the clouded forest, like the regions, clouded forest in our game is based heavily on the Swedish temperate forest, right? So, which is very cool, because it's, I personally, I love this this area. So we're like, okay, what can we take from the real world, right? But then how we can alienate this, how we can Pandorify it to make it feel like, because we have all the big, because how the gravity works in Pandora, it's much lower than Earth. It's, I think, like 80%. So like, okay, the trees will go bigger, right?
Taller trees,
and stuff like that. So everything has a reason, like a scientific reason. And every time we work with Lightstorm, and we're like, oh, we have this cool idea, and they're like, okay, what is your scientific base for that, right? So this is very important for our project. We're trying to make this world feel very grounded and realistic, right? Even though it's a alien planet, right?
Yeah.
It still needs to represent Earth, right? Because this is the core message of the franchise as well. So after we do the research, we gather the references. Even before we start drawing and sketching, we start discussing it with other teams, right? We're discussing it with tech art. We're discussing it with the biome. We have a specific biome team in our project who are just responsible for the biomes, and they're doing. I mean, you can see they're doing amazing work from how our game looks. So we're discussing with them, okay, what can we do? What are our limitations on the scattering system, for example? What are our limitations on the streaming? What can we do, to make this biome believable? But also where is interesting comes and how our game is different from the movie is the gameplay and the player navigation because of the scale. Because again, in the movie, you're framing everything, you're designing stuff to fit the frame. We're designing everything in 360, so we can't do super big plans which will obscure the player visibility, for example, right? So we need to find a good balance to be like, okay, we have the plans here, but then we have the plans which are very tall, but we can't have the plans which are here because when the player is exploring the game, they won't really see where they're going, right? So all these sort of small details come in, but also the audio, like, oh, how those plans sound, right? How those planned will make the player feel. And I think Alex Rivera and his audio team made amazing work to make the jungle and all the biomes sound amazing. Yeah.
Listen to that episode. We have an episode with Alex just a couple of before this. Go listen to that one.
And also what is very important when we're designing new plants, for example, as I mentioned, like the whole scientific fact, we can't just design a cool shape because what we're doing for Pandora is, okay, how does this plant grow? We're designing the whole life cycle from like the baby plant to like the very dead plant in the end of the life cycle. How do they reproduce? How do they spread the seeds? How do they grow and this sort of stuff.
What did it evolve from?
Exactly. So this is what we do a lot of times in the beginning. This is how the biome, like work on the biome starts. And then we go into, once we kind of establish all those rules, these are the small plants, these are the medium plants, these are the tall plants, these are the gameplay plants, because we have those gameplay plants.
Animals,
in our game. And then we start budgeting them. Okay, what can we do? We start budgeting them with tech art, but also we're budgeting them with production because again, we need to be mindful about our production timelines. And then we give this to 3D teams and they start creating the assets. And while they're creating the assets, we're also scattering them already. Like we're creating the biomes with like placeholder assets, which are, just like very basic representations of how they will look, just so we can test the navigation, so we can test how it feels to run around the biome, because this is very important. The faster you get your stuff in the engine, it's very important because, as Kunal mentioned, like the blockouts, just like to get the rough representation, it's very important to see how you feel, because it's very hard to plan how the players will feel before you can actually play it, because you can make an amazing painting, you can make amazing game design on paper, but then before you test it, before you play test it, before you prototype it, it's impossible to understand the feeling, because what makes games so complicated is we have this fun aspect, right, which is very hard to explain. You can't say, oh, make it fun, right? What does it mean, right? We need to test it and prototype and iterate on this.
Like in our previous episode with the gameplay director Martin, he was talking about like when junior gameplay directors get to watch their first user test. It's always a very eye-opening experience. But you mentioned the scattering system there, and
Kunal has been dying to talk about this.
I want to hear more. So what does scattering system mean?
So it means a fast. Well, it doesn't really say that, but it just says that scattering, adding a lot of content on a big surface quickly. And that means like plants, flora, any type of anything really, trees. You can plant anything in the scatter system. You can plug into we have like graph objects, like prefabs or like meshes that we put it in a graph, and then we can like a bunch of nodes that we assemble together. I remember this as well. And then and then we put them in the scatter system, and then the scatter system we feed it some logic, like is there a river nearby? Then we should scatter only these type of plants that are harvestable for the player because they grow near water, or these are huge trees that suck up all the light so that the saplings will not grow as big, so they will be around that tree, and then around those saplings there will be smaller bushes and other type of grass assets. So you can give like nice logic to which feeds into the lore of Avatar as well, and like how we want to build the world. we can actually make a custom template for the scatter systems, because we have, like you said, the biomes. Every biome has its own scatter template, and every scatter template can be modified to fit the lore in a sense, so that we can give it some logic and just then in just a few, I think, minutes, just to test it out, we can scatter it in real time on our map, and then you have it there. You can test it. You can jump in game, Control G, and you can just run around and feel how it feels, and test it quickly, like within minutes, which is awesome. And then once we're happy, we just bake the scatter system down in the sense where it's not real time. We bake the positions of all the plants. We store that data so that we don't have to continuously keep like live update everything on the CPU, because that's expensive. We bake everything down, and then if you want to, we can like delete and like move or add custom meshes if you want to, like a landmark, for instance, that we want to like, oh, but this is a jungle, but we want to add something unique there. And we just want to kill the area of the scatter system here and just place something very bespoke. And then that will make the experience more fun, like for the player, for a gameplay perspective.
Then a lot of that research must come into play, like to set up this logic of spawning things.
We have experts working on that daily. Like,
And also what Kunal mentioned, I think, is the baking of the scatter, and then the artists can go inside and adjust this, right? Because what we don't want the procedural system, even though it's very powerful, it gives us amazing results out of the box. We still want the artist hand to go in and adjust it, and make it human touch. You can't really reproduce it with a scatter. Maybe, I don't know, maybe in 50 years when we have super advanced AI, but currently we need artists with their artistic vision, with their artistic visual library.
It's necessary,
and fine tune this, and we do this with everywhere in the world. Yes, we have the base procedural biome scatter, but then we go and we're like, oh, let's remove those plants here because we need to open this composition for the player, for the visibility, or like for this gameplay needs, or like to make it like a cool vista. We need to remove those trees because they obscure the view, right? So this sort of stuff.
We don't want to spend like we don't want to waste an artist's time just on like propping a dense jungle. Because that's something a player will just run past, because there's nothing bespoke there. It's just a filler area where we just want to add the density for like the realistic grounded jungle avatar feeling, right? And we don't want to let artists spend hours and hours just to like place a tree and a bush and a tree and a bush like all over again. Like that's unnecessary. So scattering is the way to go.
It feels like it's a very quick and easy way to get a really good starting point. And then turn it into handcrafted areas.
It's like it's the word procedural is like, it's sort of a buzzword these days, procedural this, procedural that. Like it sounds cool, but it also means you might not have as much control as you want. So what we do with the scatter system is we developed it to an extent where we have all the control. So we can define it, we can say exactly where and how much and where near what it should scatter. In that sense, we can tell it exactly how to behave. So in the sense we can control it, it is procedural in a way where we can scatter a lot of it across a big surface of a terrain or something, but we have full control over exactly the areas. So, and it goes kind of back to the L stages I was discussing about with the landmarks. We have the same thing for like the world locks. So when we lock the world, so when we're done with the scatter, everybody's happy with it, we lock it, and that's it. And then we can only delete or add something in a certain area just to kind of polish it up in the end. And I think that's a really good process.
And I think what Kunal mentioned about the scatter system here, what we have in Snowdrop, is so powerful. It's like I can literally go to the biome team and be like, oh, can we like just slightly make these plants move a little bit to the left, in the scatter system? It's like one click and it's like, poof, the whole world is just updated. I was like, oh my God, this is so cool.
It's extremely fast. Because Kunal is petting his Snowdrop logo for the listeners. But because with procedural generation, it's a buzzword. Over time, procedural generation has been around for a while now, and it's gotten better and better and better. But we still end up in a situation where procedural generation creates some really weird stuff. Where you in a final game, what kind of tools do you? What kind of benefits do you get from Snowdrop scatter system when it comes to other procedural generated ones?
I mean, I don't think. Well, there are some procedural procedural tools that developers use to ship a game that might not have the highest quality in the sense of the consistent art. Like maybe they don't have enough QC testers to run around the entire map to test everything and look at everything and bug every floating asset.
No.
So that might be one of the reasons we do see some of those errors here and there. But in general, it's a good tool. It's not a solution to make a game. It's not a game making solution. It's a tool for the developer. If it's in the right hands and then if it's controlled and it's understood to the level, like how far can you go with it, and when should we stop using it? That's the difficult part to understand.
Yeah.
So it's like, how much power do you actually have with this tool? I think it's more of a question really for the developer.
Yeah, I really like that. It's a tool, not a solution.
Yeah.
I think that kind of sums it up very nicely.
But also to add to this, like how we approached the world on Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, like the whole world is handcrafted, right? We don't generate procedurally landmarks or like mountains and stuff like this. They're all hand sculpted, and then we use the scatter system, like to scatter, like as Kunal said, like the grass and like some of the trees and whatnot, right? But like the whole world itself is handcrafted, right? It's not procedurally made, which is very, very important and makes it different from some of the games which use it to create like procedural worlds, for example.
Yeah.
Because procedural worlds that are just generated on the fly or something, there's usually math-based solutions of like random terrain or random scatter, and then once you play it like maybe 2 or 3 times, you already understand the pattern, and then you would just see the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, you start seeing the rules.
Yeah.
And then at some point you just don't want to play the game anymore because you just you can already predict what's going to happen, and when you already get that feeling, then you're never going to play that game again.
No.
You know?
Yeah, now we go like, oh, let's add a lake here, like let's add a waterfall here. Let's like we're really handcrafting the whole world.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now I was kind of wondering when you're talking earlier about the elf stages of, for example, a landmark. Okay, so this is a thing about my thinking that I'm slowly changing doing this podcast, and I know I need to change it all the way, but I'm always stuck in this thing of, okay, what comes first and then what? So like, for example, you're creating the biome and you're doing the research on all of the different animals and planimals and plants. But when does gameplay come in? When does story come in? Of like, oh, we need something that can do this because that's in the story, or is it? Yeah, I mean, I guess the answer is what I think it might be. It's all interconnected and happening all the time between everybody.
Yeah, I mean, there's so we have like a golden path that we call it, and that is more like this is the main storyline, and like which part of the world are you going through in the majority for the storyline. So we can kind of gauge like, okay, we need to add some landmarks here to kind of direct the player, or give the player a sense of direction to the specific location that you need to go during the golden path at a certain time of a mission that you're playing in the game, for instance. And then the open world aspects, we have, we also have game design helping us, with like say the plant animals that can react to the player, like how that fills the space. And then you have the encounters of NPCs, like RDA encounters in the jungle, and also like you have to save an animal or something, and also hunting, right? So we have multiple open world sort of game experiences that sort of work everywhere in the world, and then you have like the storyline sort of main quest.
Yeah. But I think like the gameplay narrative comes first, right? Because we can make as beautiful open world and as rich open world as we want, but like if it doesn't support the game, right, doesn't support the narrative, it it doesn't. It will be just like beautiful tech demo, right? So what we communicate with game design and narrative a lot, and we get a lot of, as I mentioned, like a lot of briefs from them, like, oh, this is what we want for the story of the game, this is what for the world for the game. So it's very, very important because oftentimes, let's say we're looking at the world. And again, to give an example of Avatar, we have like this floating mountain formations, right? Because we have very vertical world. And I'm looking at it from the art perspective. I'm like, oh, I want to add a floating mountain here because, to enhance the composition and make the whole thing feel better. But then like we think about gameplay is like in our game you can actually fly to this floating mountain, and it's like, okay, if there's nothing there, like the gameplay doesn't support this, then we don't edit there, because yes, it might look better, but if it doesn't
break
support
immersion,
it doesn't support the player experience, then we don't edit there. It's the same thing that, as I mentioned, for the height of the plants, right? Yeah, this plant will look super cool if we edit like this, but if it breaks the player navigation, then we don't edit there, right? Because the player experience comes first, right? That's how the player experiences the game. And we collaborate constantly with game designers, with narrative designers. Like I think like if I go to my chats, I like just talk daily to them, because again, like whatever we do needs to be validated by them.
There's a good example of like if there's a plant that's kind of medium sized, but it has like collision on it, so the player will get you will block the player, and you have to kind of walk around it, and that can make the world feel sticky. Like you're running in the jungle and you're constantly getting stuck on things. It's very annoying for the player experience. So one way to combat it is not to just remove the player collision, because that's a simple way to do it, but then you just clip right through the asset, and that's also kind of immersion breaking. So then, that's why we come in with the ideas of like, let's do vertex shaders for like the plant bends away from the player. So you feel like you're actually pushing it away. And then we have the touch the world system where the hand reaches out and pushes. So it matches the bend as well. So when you touch the plant, it bends it away. So you feel like you're actually interacting with the things, keeping it immersed, but also solving another problem of the sticky collision. And then we can also add the element of destruction on this plant where, if you are running fast enough in a certain velocity, you reach a threshold, or if you're a big enough NPC, you can smash through it and it will like destroy into particles. So like we can keep it even more. We can give it another layer of immersion where I might just bend it because I'm not as big as a hammerhead. I can just bend it and push it away, but a hammer can charge right through it and destroy it into pieces. So it gives it like it gives it more purpose essentially. So there's ways we can like help gameplay, navigation, and with the tech we have to sort of give it a nicer experience for the player.
What's a vertex shader?
Man, I should stop just
you just walk into these things.
We have pixel shaders, which is like the textures and the colors of a pixel on an object, for instance. And then the vertex shader is the vertices that the object is built out of, the geometry. And we have vertex shader modifiers, is what I mean, is where we can tell the vertex of an object to move or do something different from the original shape. Meaning, if a plant is built in a certain way, we can make a vertex shader. We made a vertex shader where it will bend from the pivot, and it would just like it's like a rotation actually. So if you bend it too much, it will look like a snail. But we only bend it to like a couple of percent, where it gives it like this curvature shape. So everything is very squishy and like wobbly, which is nice because it sort of fits Pandora, and all the plants kind of look really good with that. And it's a very cheap solution, since we were thinking about like, okay, we can't rig every plant with skeletons. We could potentially with like GPU bones, but the time investing that or just do a vertex shader, we got away with the vertex shader quite well. So almost, I think 90% of all the plants are using just vertex shader modifiers to like interact, bend, planimal animations, like the spore plant that's the mushroom cloud comes out. That one is also like a morph target system. It's also a vertex shader where it's just pre-baked poses where we just blend between, and then we can use like spring behavior. It gives it a little bit of like a wobble and inertia, like it tapers off and slows down. And we can control that. So we have a lot of like possibilities with our shaders, which is awesome. And it's quite scalable. Like all the trees, all the plants are using like, I think the whole world is using like maybe like a handful of vertex shaders for the wind and interactions and morph targets for planimals and everything, which is good.
It's interesting to hear the word shaders in this context. We're coming in like shaders originally for me is like, okay, how does an object react to light? Like how it is, how is it rendered? How does this play?
That's usually the pixel shader.
Yeah, exactly. That was in my head. But then when we started talking about this, we've talked about the scatter system a couple of times before in various formats. Then you started talking about these shaders, and kind of eye-opening how much you can actually do with these different kinds of technologies.
Yeah.
But the destruction part then.
Yeah.
Let's shoot that plant.
I love that. That's so from Division 1. So I was working on Division 1 when I got here first, and we were looking a lot at the destruction system, like the fragmentation, like when you shoot, you can shoot off each and every individual brick of a wall dynamically fragments. It's not pre-destructed. It's not pre-destroyed in Houdini or anything. It's like it actually generates the fragmentation on the fly. And then it creates the shatter, and then we use a fragment mask to determine where the brick mortar is and like how we separate it. And then it actually comes out and it leaves an indentation of the wall. And you actually have a different texture and material on the back of the brick. And you can notice that when you shoot like tiled walls in Division, you can see like there's like the glue or whatever behind the tiles is there. It's not like it's multiple layers of meshes. It's one mesh like a normal object. It's just we generate a new hole and new geometry on the fly, and then actually make a new texture using depth from the. So we have a bunch of shaders doing all of that stuff. And for Avatar, the challenge was, how do we make it feel like you're just blasting through the jungle? Because we wanted to achieve a sense of reality in the sense as well, because even in the movie of Avatar, they're doing a lot of gunfights in the jungle, and you can see the trees collapse and like plants just kind of wiggle and wobble around, and then smoke and just getting destroyed. And I mean, it's not like I want the players to go around and shoot everything up. Just maybe a little part of me wants that. But what I wanted was to have a sense of realism. So how do we achieve that? So we developed the fragment system from Division 1 and 2 to support more organic shapes like convex and concave plants that are like growing all kinds of shapes, right? And then we developed like a leaf cutting system, so where it's essentially does the same thing as the brick wall in Division, but it does a random cut instead, and then we can cut the piece off exactly. The fragment comes off, but since the problem was it turned into a physical object, like a physics object with the custom convex hull, which is like the physical collision, like generated, and shooting a bunch of plants that drop performance heavily, right? Because you just have a bunch of CPU physics, falling around everywhere. So we had the idea of turning that into a particle. So every fragment that gets shot off, we just send that to a particle system instead. And it didn't use a convex solid, which is a bounding box. So it's much cheaper to generate the actual shape. And we just knew the center of the bounding box that determined the rotation axis of the plant's fragment leaf. And then from that, we just used the particle behavior, like falling leaf, like that sort of like rotates and follows the wind as well, and like slowly falls down. And we also add a vertex shader modifier to it, so the leaf sort of wobbles a little bit like this. And so when you shoot off a piece, it's the exact piece that you shot off that will then turn and follow the wind and everything. And then it will just die off. It doesn't have any collision, which is fine because we don't really care. We just want to see a bunch of shit breaking. And that way we could achieve what we wanted to the Avatar style, like blasting through the jungle. You just see things fall left and right, and you get bullet holes everywhere, and the fragments on the leaves. And it also works with explosions. So it releases every instance or the vertex group of each plant, leaf, whatever that's separated. It will turn it into a particle, and it will just all sort of get pushed by the grenade's force radially as well. So it will just push everything. Yeah.
I remember the good old days when you were
Good times.
impressed that a gun would leave a bullet hole in the wall,
Yeah.
like a
The
texture,
little
just
decals.
like the decals.
Then it goes away over time.
Yeah,
Oh,
that was super annoying. Though.
Yeah, you can't keep that many in memory.
No.
you know.
No, exactly.
It's too many
when
instances.
you got to the first boat in Metal Gear Solid 2, you can actually shoot the bottles. That was mind blowing. Now listening to you, it's like, oh dear.
Yeah,
AAA gaming has.
We could do all that. That's the cool thing about the way we can do the fragment system now is that we can turn anything into a particle. If it's like the mesh that's actually being shot at can be turned into a particle system, and we can give it a different behavior. So we don't have to create pre-destroyed assets, which is really awesome. We can just like, anything that, however, it depends on the artist how it built it. So we have guidelines to like, if you want to make this plant destructible, then you have to build it in a certain way. Like the hierarchy of it. If it's a plant, then it needs to stem from the ground, right? Or for instance, the ground, then it grows outwards, then it's anchored to the ground. So the way they have to build the asset is a little bit different. But if it's stitched in a single vertex group, then we can start like trimming off the plant from the top, and then you can leave the residue, leave the bottom part in the end. So you can blast everything, and it would just leave like a little stem or core that's ripped off from the plant.
And that kind of goes into another thing connected with this is the pollution in the game, like the dynamic of the world.
Oh yeah, that's
how you approach, like, okay, you have a plant, now you need to pollute it.
There's two levels of this for gameplay and visuals.
Yeah.
The first thing was the visual language.
Yeah.
like from
I think
concepts.
we wanted to, because the thing about RDA, right, that they're coming to this area and they're making a stamp right on Pandora. So we wanted to really show this in the game, right? They're coming, they don't care about the planet, you know, they're just going there and they're like destroying everything to like mine their materials. Yeah, I mean, because Pandora is really like a metaphor for Earth, right? So we wanted to really show with the pollution system, right, that they're really damaging the environment, right, and it also affects gameplay. So we worked a lot to like, there was a lot of back and forth and like, okay, how do we want it to look? And we ended up with this like oily kind of feeling of the environment. So like when you go, diseased plants. So you go from like the green, lush and beautiful environments to this area, you really recognize it. Like, and you see also we changed the VFX, we changed the colors, you know, and it really gives you this sense of like, oh, something is wrong. This area is sick, you know, like I want to really help it and really restore the nature there. And then also we had the gameplay limitations to feel in like when you have the pollution in the world, you can't harvest, right? So like all this sort of stuff came in together with developing how the pollution looks and works and how we communicate it to the player, because again, like the player experience is very important, because before we had like, for example, this more gradient system. So like it was more like starting slowly and then coming to the full pollution, right? So like from like a gradient, but it was not very clear for the players as well. It's like, okay, is it polluted now or is it not polluted? So we had to like make it, okay, this is polluted, not polluted.
Be gradual.
Right.
It used to be very gradual because we developed a shader in the sense so that it can support like from 0 to 1 pollution range essentially. So like you start seeing some of the leaves turning a bit yellowish, and then they go into more brown. So we like use gradient maps to sort of like give it like different layers, like stages of pollution. And then when you're at the heart of it, it's just dead. Like it's very brown, dead, almost like white, like it's like fungus, like, you know, the bad stuff that grows on dead leaves and stuff. And then the ground has more oil under it. So it's the terrain shading is also affected by the pollution. The bioluminescence is also affected by pollution. And the water is also affected by the pollution. So you can drop like a game. We have a gameplay object for pollution. Like we have like a barrel like leaks pollution. Put that there, and everything around that barrel would be infected or affected by the pollution. And that's completely dynamic. So if you would remove that barrel, or delete it, or like destroy it, it would then slowly fade away if you wanted to. And that's sort of what we do with when you defeat a base, we just like gradually show like you've now saved this part of Pandora. It's healing.
It's being reclaimed.
It's being reclaimed by nature.
Yeah, and I think it's a very beautiful way of getting the message across, because one thing is showing it visually, you know, the pollution, bad, all that. But when you as a player enter the area and it affects your experience, your gameplay, what you can do, it's affecting you directly as the player, which makes you want to fix it. I think it's a very, very eloquent way to get that point across as well. Yeah.
I think that the SAP really allowed us to kind of bring this like ethical problems, but then connect them to gameplay, right? To kind of make the players want to clean up the pollution as well, to gain the benefits.
Another bleak perspective. I think it was Ricky Gervais who said it. It's like if all the insects die, everything dies, but if humans die, the earth will thrive. Right. Something like that. I think it was him. I don't know. Maybe he quoted someone else. But
No, I think what you're describing here in general, like with the pollution and the dynamics of that, and how the plants evolve, or all the research you've done, how that came to life, how the physics came to life, how just walking through plants came to life, kind of it started to like really explains why Pandora in Avatar Frontiers on Pandora, and some people probably think I'm biased because I work here, but it's such a cool place to just exist in.
Yes.
It's the immersiveness, and we can hear now like the length that developers here and AAA in general kind of go to now to make sure that their experience is as immersive as possible.
It's such a tricky thing, but it's such a lovely challenge. It's like the how do you maintain a player's immersion consistently in the playthrough? Because that's how you lose like 5 hours. You just went right by you. You didn't even know what happened. That's because you've been constantly, you know, your attention has been constantly taken by small details over and over again, new things coming up in front of your screen, or hearing something different. You walk towards it. There's an actual insect making that noise. And then you go up even closer and like you see that the rain is like sliding on the surface of the rock, and then getting stuck on the edge and then dripping off, so you can
Yeah.
see the full cycle of a raindrop on a surface. Like little details like that just keeps you like, wow.
Yeah, this is what
I'm
makes it
in this.
believable, right? All
Yeah.
the small details make the world feel very believable, and this is where we pay a lot of attention at Massive. We're like always iterating all those small details to make sure that the players experience the world. Because one of our key goals for this project in the beginning was like how we bring the Pandora to video game, right? How do we make it immersive? Like this, one of our main characters. How do we make it feel believable, like all of other characters? So.
Yeah, and it's really, and you talk about the player experiences as well. Definitely, we're doing a couple of these episodes now around Avatar, and I definitely think you should listen to all of them. I'm not just self-plugging that, because we're going to talk about, we talked game design, you mentioned it before, like how that comes into play, like how all of you are working together. Like the immersive, believable world won't be nice to hang out with if gameplay isn't fun. But if gameplay, like if the world isn't as immersive as possible, then gameplay won't be as fun.
And you don't have stuff to interact with.
And curiosity and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's sort of I think the biggest challenge is now that we do have, stronger GPUs and we're like focusing so much on the graphics and like everything needs to be very pretty all the time. But then we also sort of create a depth in the sense of the interactivity of things. Because if the player's eye meets the expectation of visual quality, that this looks amazing, but then the feeling might not be the same. And that feeling might be what we're lacking sometimes, but that's the challenge. And that's the sort of like, okay, now we have these insane graphics cards that can render all this geometry and we can have ray tracing and everything. Now, how do we take everything else with it? Like, how do we bring the experience to that level of what we see? And how do we make that feel like that?
Right.
Yeah. How do we integrate it rather than lean on it?
Exactly. Yeah.
Because like as Kunal said, like affordance for the player is very important. So like if I see a chair in the game, right, I understand that I can sit on it. So like if I can't, right, it can frustrate the player. So we need to find a really good balance on like, okay, how do we show those affordances to the players? Through the visual design, through the game design, through the logic of the world, right? So,
Yeah, I think it comes back to kind of what you were saying in the beginning. Like, okay, you're concept artist, a tech artist, a game designer, but at the end of the day, you're game developers. You're looking to one goal, and that is to make a great game.
And everybody has a responsibility to see that end game, to see and like to understand what the player is, what we were trying to give the player. That's what everybody needs to understand in order for this to work as a collaborated effort. Then everybody needs to understand the what we need to achieve for the player.
Yeah, it's something that we're discussing a lot with the team when we're, let's say, doing a concept, and we're like, okay, how does it affect the players, right? How does it affect gameplay? How does it affect the story, right? Yeah, it's maybe a cool visual design, right? Yeah, but what was the intent? Right? What
why?
What problem we're trying to solve, right? With the design, and does it solve this problem?
That's true. That's a really good question. Does it solve a problem? Does it add one?
Exactly. Yeah, that's very important.
Yeah. Now I feel like we could sit here for a couple more hours and talk, but we do have a limit on time. But I wanted to touch a little bit upon what we like to do at the end of Behind Massive Screens, and that is kind of your advice and thoughts for people out there listening that have an interest in getting into your specific field. Do you have any sort of hints and tips or resources?
Yeah, I can start with visual design and concept art. Focus on the design aspect. I believe what I see in last couple of years, the trend on like websites like ArtStation, right, which is very like a hub for the concept artists to go and publish their work, is we're focusing too much on creating pretty pictures without solving the design, right? So I would suggest you think of every time you do a portfolio piece, or say if you want to go to Massive, right, or to any other studio, think of what the problem you're trying to solve with this one, right? What we discussed, like what is the gameplay problem you're trying to solve with the design. So study visual design and also game design techniques. So like, okay, is this, again, like for example, you're making a design, is like, oh, it's an object that I'm adding to this concept piece. Does it have affordance for the player? Like, how do we solve the composition? How do we save the gameplay readability? All this stuff is very, very, very important. And at least when I look into the portfolios, this is what I search for. I don't look at how good your painting skills. I mean, obviously I look at them, but this is the second, right? It's not the most important thing, because if you're an amazing painter, if you're an amazing artist, but you can't solve problems, then it will be very hard for you to adjust to the game industry. So this is very, very important for me. So yeah, look at design and also play games. I notice very often that a lot of young artists nowadays, they don't play games. Or like, let's say I'm talking in an interview or something, it's like, oh, like this is how they did in this game or that game. They're like, I never tried them. I'm like, yeah, you have to know at least those games.
And not just play games, to play all the games.
Exactly. Yeah. Like play the games. Like you can just look also what
Learn from them.
Yeah, learn from them, right? What I suggest to a lot of artists, young artists, that you don't have time to play the games, right? Especially like if maybe you're working, you're like, I know, like Kunal selling phones, or like I used to do. I used to work in fast food. You don't have time, right? You're tired, but just like sit in the evening while you're drawing or you're painting or doing a piece, like put a less playthrough video like to watch on YouTube just to see what mechanics or like how they solve this and that problem. This really helps your whole library of the problem solving skills. So this is very important, and also do a lot of research. I want to see research in your portfolio pieces. I don't want to see just a beautiful image. So spend 80% of time on research, 20% of time on actually painting or drawing or designing.
I have to say the same thing. The research part is something I don't see much of. I would like to see more of. Like I want to see the reason and the intent of why you're chasing this let's say researching some sort of effects from life. I don't know, it could be material. What I don't want to see is a common like shader that everybody does, like an ice shader or something, because that's like a tutorial. Like you can find those everywhere on YouTube. They're littered with that. Like anybody could follow a tutorial and just copy the nodes and whatever if you want to make a shader. I want to see the research behind like something that inspired you to make something, and not just because you want to have something in your portfolio. I think that's a lot. That would do a lot more.
Turn a vertex shader into particles, and
then
we'll talk.
a little bit outside the box. Like not just following a tutorial on YouTube, but like actually showing some of your interest in it as well. And what else? You mentioned something in the beginning. Was that something like I
forgot what I mentioned.
Yeah.
But I think what can help a lot, and what helped me a lot before, is like when you're making, let's say, a portfolio piece, or you're just like making projects for yourself, like obviously do those, right? Don't expect to get, especially what we mentioned in the beginning, that the it's so hard to get in the gaming industry because the competition is so big, right? That all those like available junior positions are very limited, so you need to really stand out. So always try to prepare your portfolio, and to do this, try to come up with the imaginary project, right? And try to solve the problems from this specific project, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to do it. Like you have to give yourself a challenge where you are forced to think outside the box on your own terms. Like you create your own challenge. Like you say, you create your own maybe Unreal or Unity project, and you maybe are unsure of all the hurdles that might occur, but that's okay. That's the point. And now, how do you solve them? Now, that's what I want to see. That's where the problem solving comes in.
Yeah, and I think during a podcast with Palle, current art director on Division...
Producer. I did the
art
same
producer on Division 2, he mentioned also establish a timeline.
Yes.
And give the timeline alongside the project that you made of did you hit your timeline and deadline?
And explain why and what happened. Because then you can also understand like the pressure that applied and how do you handle the pressure. And that's a really good advice, actually. I need to do that too.
This I think very important, because especially like for concept design, for the visual design, because you can go. I think there was. I forgot. It was from movie Oblivion. I forgot the name of the artist. Yeah, with the Tom Cruise. There was the designer who designed this flying vehicle with
the little blobs and the rotated.
So he basically posted the image of like, okay, this is the design after like 1 day or like 3 days, and this is the design after I worked on it for a year. And right, it's like a huge difference, right? Which kind of proves that you can work on one visual, like one character for like years, right? Easily, right? I think this is what they did for Ready Player One. They worked on the main character for about 2 years, right? Visual design. So like you need to set up boundaries and see like, because we are making a product, and for a game, for example, compared to a movie, we can't spend 2 years working on one character, right? Because
it's like a kill your darlings a little bit. It's about finding, okay, when is enough?
Exactly. Yeah.
And then one other thing I wanted to say is like your curiosity matters the most.
Yes.
If you're not curious, that means you're not willing to learn new things. You're not willing to step out of your comfort zone. So please do. Please.
Good advice.
All the cameras.
Yeah. And with those words, that's the end of today's episode. I always feel refreshed at the end of these, and also a little bit smarter, and also a little bit dumber, because there's still a lot of terms that I just don't understand. But thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you very much
for having us.
It's an absolute pleasure. And thank you for watching and or listening, and rate, review,
bell,
click the bell, and all that. And
algorithm.
We'll see you on the next one.
Bye.